Hi, folks. I'm Adrian Sanabria, the host of Enterprise Security Weekly. Every week, we interview the most interesting folks we can find talking about the most pressing cybersecurity issues and challenges facing the enterprise today. Myself and my co-hosts have each been in the industry for decades, long enough to see the patterns in the industry and explore where trends are going. In addition to enterprise challenges, we also follow the vendor space, the most interesting security startups emerging, technology and product trends, all the most interesting funding and acquisition announcements. Finally, we love to discuss the latest trends in tech and how they'll impact cybersecurity. If you're wondering how the latest in AI, quantum computing, cloud, and DevOps is going to impact security a few years down the road, you should follow the Enterprise Security Weekly podcast.
To Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Jason Albuquerque and Ben Carr. Security Weekly listeners, cyber threats are evolving. Is your organization keeping up? The 2023 Cybersecurity Year in Review is here. Uncover the latest challenges and strategic responses in CRA's 2023 Cybersecurity Year in Review, sponsored by RSA Conference. From the impact of generative AI to the risks of ransomware to navigating new SEC rulings, get ahead for 2024 with your free copy. Download the report at securityweekly.com/Year in Review 2023. Security Weekly listeners save $100 on their RSA Conference 2024 full conference pass. RSA Conference will take place May 6th to May 9th in San Francisco and on demand. To register using our discount code, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC24 and use the following code. It's long, so pay attention. 54 Uniform Charlie Yankee Bravo Alpha Lima November Charlie Foxtrot Delta. We hope to see you there. How was that, Jason, for a little military lingo?
Friggin' impressive, my friend. I love it. Good job. Good job.
It had so many letters in it. I'm like, if I don't do it this way, nobody's going to remember that code.
I love it.
All right. So the first breaking news I want to make, which is not in the show list, is I want to congratulate my daughter, Renee Alderman, the executive producer of this podcast, for getting engaged when we were in Mexico last week to Mr. Tim McCormick. Congratulations, baby girl. I hope you have a wonderful life together.
Yes, congratulations. Sorry. I saw it on the socials. Congrats.
Yes, I had to do that for a little call out. All right, let's get into the articles. So, like the first four are all around the CISO. So we've had a couple weeks off. And as I was going through stories, there started to emerge a series of articles around the CISO role. There's a couple that are using some research from ESG and from INS, which I wanted to dig into. And in this kind of, we kind of teed this up late last year, Jason and Ben. We were talking through some of the changes and structures of the role. And we're starting to see some more articles talk a little more specifically about this. So I wanted to pull these in this week and kind of recap like some of the things that we'll probably see going into 24 with the role of the CISO and kind of just help everybody get ready to navigate it.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, I mean, corporate leaders need to really take a look at this and take it seriously, because there's a lot of challenges ahead, right? There's obviously, the threats are rapid and increasing and more sophisticated than ever. The technologies that are being put in front of us have more risk than we've ever seen before, especially for organizations who aren't prepared. The stress levels are just there. They're at a higher level for CISOs. So, if executive teams aren't paying attention to this, you're going to have your CISOs burning out and you're going to start losing some good people. So we really need to make sure we're focused.
Agreed. And so I'm going to go into the first article, which is the ESG article from John Olstick, which is a combination of ESG and I think it was ISSA. 63% of cybersecurity professionals believe that working as a cybersecurity professional today is more difficult than it was 2 years ago. I'm not surprised.
No.
62% of CISOs, shared the opinion. So I think to your point, Jason, things are more challenging. they're continuing to be challenging. We heard this beating of, all these jobs in cybersecurity, but when you go out and see who's actually hiring, there's actually not that much hiring going on, which is putting, I think, more and more stress on the existing teams and the CISOs because they have to do more with their existing staff. They're not necessarily getting a ton of headcount, I don't think, based on what I've seen so far on the hiring side. So that just adds more stress to the CISO and these existing teams, which doesn't help.
Yeah, last year was a bad year for, I think, hiring across the board in cyber. I mean, it was just anybody you talk to, like the anecdotal evidence will tell you it was not great, and there weren't a lot of positions that were being sourced, right? And so I think teams were under a lot of stress because they were underfunded. I mean, the economy was just, I think, a contributing factor to that. I like this article, but like this is actually, I think, almost like a part two of the previous article. He references it up early up front, and we never really covered it. But there was an article of why 2024 will be the year of the CISO, and I think he had some really good points in that. Right, like not to jump into an article that's not listed here, but because it's tagged, I'll reference back to it. I mean, there were a lot of legal challenges that came out of kind of market conditions, right, and stuff with Tim Brown and the challenges that Joe Sullivan had, from Uber. You've got the shortage of CISOs to hire, and then a number of reasons he puts is like CISOs may be moving out of the market, right? If you've got these legal issues that come up, what's the benefit? Like, why would you want to be under that if you're not getting the pay, if you're not getting respect, if you're not being supported by the rest of the executives in the company? All in all, it's a challenging market, right? And as people, and he references it again in this article, as people start to age out effectively, right? If you've been in the industry for 20, 25 years, some people are thinking, well, maybe there are other options for me. And so I think there will be this vacuum. And I've seen an uptick in the market right now since the 1st of January. It's definitely starting to change. I don't know if it'll swing back a little bit, but there is a lot more movement. So I think there's a lot of spot on points in both of these articles.
Yeah, I looked at that previous article too, Ben, and some of the things that he's referencing there, like more CISOs will end up reporting to the CEO in the coming year. There's going to be more scrutiny around the equity and bonuses, and making sure that CISOs are on D&O insurance, and there was a lot of great information in part one of what's here, which is part two. So I would suggest reading both because the first article is great as well.
Yeah, and when I pulled in Article 2, I wanted to see what was similar and different in the research from ESG, right? And one of the things that I took away was 82% of CISOs were satisfied with their job in the ESG report, but in the INS report, it says 75% are looking to change jobs. That seems to be a little bit of a contradiction between these two reports.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure where the data points are coming from, but I mean, I'll tell you right now, some of the CISOs that I've spoken to and talked to on a regular basis, have recently made a jump, right? So at the end of the day, I don't think they were totally satisfied in the job that they were in. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made the jump. And it could be a combination of things. It could be a monetary thing. It could be the culture of the organization. It could be, a collection of reasons why. But at the end of the day, I've seen quite a few people making jumps, or at least looking.
Interesting. Yeah. Article 3. So I kind of skipped Article 2. I tried to pull out some of the highlights. I don't know if there's anything else in that INS study that you guys want to hit on, but
yeah, I mean, there are a couple of concerns in there. I mean, one of them is 90% of CISOs are at least 2 levels removed from the CEO and don't get time with the board. Only 50% say they even meet with the board on some type of a cadence. I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time, and it's something that stood out to me as just a continuing issue with where our CISOs are positioned.
Yeah, look, there was just 50% engaged with the company's board on a quarterly basis. Like that's should be shocking for most people.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, with cyber being the level of risk it is, and you're not engaging with the board to kind of give an overview, that speaks directly to where I think the SEC is trying to target.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Yeah, and then
So
there's one more. There was one more that I just wanted to cover. It's more than a third said that their board can't help them and offer them clear enough insight into the organization's risk tolerance. Now I look at that and say, is that a board issue? Is that a CISO issue? Is that a communication issue? I don't know, but at the end of the day, I think it's something we need to call out.
Yeah, and you're going to see that in the next couple articles around creating a common language and risk quantification. Like they come out in these next two. Yep. Definitely, right? And in Article 3, I kind of, when I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, I predicted this back in 2015. So when I wrote my 5-year strategy plan for Tenable, December 2015, I predicted that the role of the CISO would move from an operational technology role to a governance role, right? And this article talks about how the CISO, is going to be the foundation of that cyber governance kind of capability, which I think is right. If you think about what's transpired over the last few years, and now with the SEC guidance coming out, governance is going to be an important component of this. Now, I think risk management is, and risk and compliance roll up into this governance kind of category. But the CISO doesn't have to be an operational leader. I think they're going to have to be more of a governance-based leader going forward.
Yeah, no, agreed. I mean, the entire side of the aisle of GRC is so important these days, right? The governance, the risk, and the compliance side is such an important aspect of the business, and more, we're saying if you're not able to manage and quantify risk, you're going to end up reporting to someone who can. So that takes it all into play. Where as cybersecurity professionals in a business, that's where we need to hang our hats and start really leaning in on. The technical aspects are important, but you don't have to be the technologist. You don't have to be hands on keyboard, right? You don't.
You don't.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. The thing that always challenges me, though, about GRC is it seems like the G and the R are just like chopped off, and everybody only focuses on compliance. And
I agree.
Like that's the big problem is if you're focusing on a compliance, and I think almost every CISO I know rails against the fact that like we don't want to do this as a compliance-driven activity, right? And I don't think the rest of the business understands what that means, and it just means that look, there's other things we have to do to address the risk and the governance of the company to be able to do business in the way that we want to, right? It's not just check a box and move on. Otherwise, why even have a CISO, right? Like just have a checklist up on the wall and have somebody check it every now and then. That's the disconnect here. And so like when I hear governance, I love governance. I just think it's often misassociated, and people see governance and hear compliance.
Yeah, yeah, no. And to your point, Ben, that's why typically in those conversations, I try to articulate compliance as a byproduct. Compliance is a byproduct of good security, of good governance, right? Of good risk management. And if we can start really pushing that narrative to the leadership team and have them understand that compliance is a byproduct of all these other things that we're doing extremely well at, I think we can move the needle.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think the challenge with the existing GRC space, and I've talked to a lot of clients, I've talked to a lot of partners around this area, right? The way we thought about it was big C first, then kind of roll that up to G, and pretty big G, and R was little. Like it was little r, right? In the naming of that space is almost did us a disservice, right? Because we really started with compliance to drive some level of governance around policies primarily, and very little risk.
Right.
What this article points out is the need to create a common language around risk and to quantify risk. The market's going to shift to big R, which then should drive G and C downstream. Right? And that's where I see the shift in the market needing to go and coming, because this is where the big GRCs are struggling a little bit. They don't have a big R capability. And those folks that can understand how to quantify risk consistently to financial dollars are going to drive downstream compliance and governance activities in a more prioritized way. And it's not going to be from the bottom up. That's my hope.
100% agreed. And it allows us to have a better business conversation as well. Because we're prioritizing risk, prioritizing spend.
how many times do you get in a conversation where, what does the business want to do? Well, we want to be SOC 2 compliant. We want to be FedRAMP, right? Like that's no. What we want to do is we want to do security well to support the business. And as a result, we'll get FedRAMP certification or we'll get SOC 2. Are there certain things that you're going to have to do that are outliers to get that compliance rating? Sure. But that shouldn't be your main goal. Your main goal shouldn't be to get a certification or to be compliant with something. It should be to do the right thing for your investors and your customers.
Yeah,
agreed.
And sometimes because how complicated vendor risk is, and sometimes how check in the box vendor risk is, the leadership is seeing that as the only outcome. I need SOC 2 because my clients won't purchase anything from me unless I have that, right? So we need to be able to have that deeper conversation of what that means. Yes, the outcome is still a SOC 2 because it's a have to have if we want to be doing business with these certain
but
customers.
Why is that what your customers want, right? What's the driver for that?
Exactly.
The driver isn't just because they want you to have a compliance cert.
Right, exactly. And that's our job now to take it to that next level, take it deeper.
I am starting to hear the conversations shift with clients. I mean, I agree with you. Like early on, it was all about compliance.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm starting to see the need to really quantify and understand risks. We were on with a prospect, I don't know, it was December, I think. And when the control team tells you their biggest challenge is they don't know how to quantify back to financial dollars around how their controls are working, you know the market's starting to shift. So we're seeing positive signs, and I think a lot of it is from the SEC regulation perspective coming down, where everybody's trying to understand how to quantify this, to understand materiality, to figure out what to disclose. And so it is starting to shift the market, and the conversations are starting to shift.
And we've seen, like, you mentioned materiality in SEC, right? Like, we've seen a couple, filings recently around this. And when I look at some of the stuff in the filings, you do have to scratch your head and go, man, is this a knee jerk? Is this really material, right? Because it's just as damaging to report stuff that's really not material and confuse the investors. In fact, if you read, SolarWind's response to the SEC filing, I read that today. Like they talk about that, right? Like that it's almost as bad, if not worse in some cases, to inundate your investors with minutia that they can't understand or consume, right? So it's a confusing landscape right now.
Oh yeah. Yep, I see. Fourth article, the Joseph Steinberg article, again, it's kind of reiterating some of the points from some of the other articles, right? Mitigating financial risks. Well, first I have to quantify financially if I'm going to mitigate financial risks. So back to the CRQ in the previous article, operational continuity, which was kind of our conversation around cyber readiness in the first segment, how important it is to make sure that operations can continue to move forward in the case of an attack. What was the third? Oh, building customer trust and reputation, right? Yeah. So, I mean, some really good points here. Meeting regulatory compliance was last on his list. So I think he has the order close.
You didn't. I think I paused out there for a hot minute. Sorry about that. But no, one of the aspects that I thought was a little underrated in this article that I think we need to bring up, because again, I mean, if you look at Joseph Steinberg, he's heavily involved in AI. Safeguarding sensitive data, I think, is something that organizations really need to put a focus on, especially if they're going to start leaning into things like Microsoft Copilot and all of these tools now that are going to be available. If they don't do the diligence around safeguarding their data and really start looking at it and classifying it and understand the landscape, right? Understand what's out there within their organization, we're going to start seeing a lot of notifications happening because of sensitive information, getting leaked, insider threat type issues, and we're just going to see a lot going on if folks aren't focused on safeguarding data.
Yeah, well, to that point, Jason, I think even just educating people on what sensitive data is. I mean, I think they generally understand the term, but why should they want to protect it, right? Like I've seen that time and time again internally in development teams that they don't really connect with the rubber meets the road of thinking about it personally, how they would be concerned if their data was used in the wrong way.
Right. No, 100% agree. And the time for do hard is now. We've been talking about this being a risk, but the reality of AI being in your organization and just some tests that we've run through, just leveraging Microsoft Copilot to do searches where you put in the right prompt, you're starting to see HR professional information, right? If you're not protecting it, it's going to get dangerous really, really fast if organizations aren't focused and really start looking at their data and, the confidentiality of the data and classification of that data and really start wrapping their heads around it. It's going to get dangerous fast.
Lovely. All right, last two articles, some leadership communication pieces. Want to be a better leader? Stop thinking about work after hours. I'm in deep trouble.
Yeah, me too. I'm screwed. Yeah, you know what though? This leans into the principle that we always talk about here as leaders. If we're not taking care of ourselves and modeling the way, we're not going to be able to take care of our teams, right? So, it's something that I think, Matt, you realizing it, me realizing it, Ben realizing it, we understand there's a problem. We understand that, we have issues, being connected all the time. And it's all about what are we going to do about it? Because we're modeling the way for the folks on our team. And if they see us do it, they're going to model that because they think it's the right way.
I completely agree, Jason. Like, how many times have you looked at a job or an opportunity and asked about, or, even if you don't ask physically, you're not asking it of the interviewer, right? You're asking questions around what's the work-life balance here? Yeah. And then you've interviewed people and people have come out and blatantly asked, what's the work-life balance? What does this look like? Am I, working on weekends? And then you get in the role and that completely goes out the window. You're obviously not that concerned about it. There's a perception that you are, but if you're taking emails after hours, if you're pinging your staff after hours, it's an indicator that, you don't have great work-life balance. And so I think people really need to figure that out. And you just to your point, you have to model that behavior so your people know it's the right way to act.
Let me tell you, I mean, we're all connected now with all these collaboration portals, whether it's Slack or Teams or whatever the case may be. One of the best things in those platforms is that you can actually schedule chats. So a lot of times as a leader, I have things that are top of mind that I have to get off my mind. Otherwise, I don't want to lose focus on it or forget about it or have it get lost. And I need to write it up now. But I don't want that person at 10 o'clock at night to see it and have to feel obligated to respond. So you know what? Schedule the chat for the morning. Get it off your chest, get it off your mind, write it down, and have it be sent at 8:30 the next day. It's little things like that that can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think I did a pretty good job last week. I did not work at all. I was on vacation. We were down in Mexico, and I didn't respond to anything. Everybody knew I was off, and so I could spend that time to relax. So I can do it, right? I think the harder part is when you're when you're working during the day and you're waiting for something in the evening, you see it and you respond to it. That's the hard part for me. I can turn it off on vacation pretty easily. Yeah. It's the day to day that sometimes you just go after.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's it's the drive-bys that happen all day. I call it the drive-by because I'm walking by the island. I see my phone. I pick it up. I check to see if there's a message for me. And right then and there, I know I'm going down the rabbit hole, right? Going down the rabbit hole right there because I know something's going to pop. It's going to make me want to respond. We have to do that level of introspection and detox, I think, sometimes from being connected.
Yep. And if you go back to the first episode of the year, I gave people the top 50 hobbies to try to do one of those hobbies. Get after work, go do a hobby, disconnect from work.
Right.
Tonight is pickleball, 5:00.
Nice.
I will not be responding to work emails or Slacks when I'm playing pickleball. That's guaranteed. So, last article. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to listen to this one. I pulled this article previously around how to respond to negative feedback. Mm-hmm. I posted it in here so people could listen to it, because I think it's an important topic to talk about. I don't know if either of you guys got a chance to listen to this podcast.
I read the transcript. There's a tab that had the transcript of it. I read the transcript, and to be honest with you, it was really good. You know, at the end of it, it talked about a leader who, you know, had a specific problem at hand, and it was about negative feedback from the team. And then when that leader went back and kind of did their own introspection and really wanting to prove it out, found out that, you know, her perspective versus the team's perspective were off. And it was just kind of a good exercise to go through. And what I brought out of it was my perspective on how things are going aren't always the team's perspective on how things are going. And it's about knowing the audience and really figuring out, you know, how they take communications, and they take how I'm acting. They take how, you know, the day-to-day communication is being delivered, and really stepping in someone else's shoes to see their perspective. So I thought it was a good exercise to go down, just to really think about. Sometimes your perspective on how things are going aren't always 100% dead on.
Yeah, and you know what, I liked what you brought out here. It was the thing I pulled out of the article too, was she didn't just go down the route of, you know, well, I'm getting negative feedback, so it must be true, right? I mean, she kind of tried to get some assessment of ground truth on that and where the perspectives may be off. And I've used in my personal life, I've often talked about you know, I've said, look, if you come home and your wife or your husband is angry at you, and you're like, well, that's not the actual way it is. Like you're seeing things differently. You can have that argument all day long. It's not going to be successful for you, right? Like you have to listen to their perspective, understand that that's their opinion of how things are going, and then figure out how you change the reality of the situation to affect that perception, right? And I think that's the biggest thing that people hopefully can take out of this.
100%. And the one line that I pulled out that I think is important to really communicate here for the listeners is, you know, she mentions the goal is creating a culture where we can all feel seen, valued, and heard. No matter your perspective, no matter your experience, no matter where you are in the organization, that's ultimately the goal. So as a leader, if you take that as that kind of high level principle, and you can really take a step back and put yourself in someone else's shoes and say, I want to make sure that I'm creating a culture where people feel seen, valued, and heard, I think you'll be going down the right path.
Great way to end this segment. Seen, valued, and heard. Gentlemen, thank you. Always a pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.